Hello, it's your internet dad again, and giving some talks and life lessons to help you in your future. And today's talk is about wine, different wines that are available around the world, and versions of wines. And the first thing I want to get off my chest, of course, is that I do not recommend underage drinking. There is medical facts that a growing brain can be damaged by booze, by nicotine, and by drugs. By the time you're in your 20s, your brain will be fully developed and it'll be much more robust. So in the meantime, I'm not recommending you drink any of the wines. I'm giving you a basic education so that you're not embarrassed by ignorance. Now, this is very basic. There are people who spend their lives studying wine. This is certainly not for them. Basically, you have two types of wine, white and red. And white wine tends to be lighter, and red wine tends to be heavier and more complex. There is a middling version called rosé, and it's halfway between the two, and it's pink. It's more frequently drunk in the summer because it's considered a light wine. Many years ago, much more formal dinners were in vogue that went for a number of courses, and we learned that wine was never served during the soup course, and during the fish course, white wine was served, and in the meat course, red wine was served. There were other wines served later, but those were the basics. Now, they're not hard and fast rules, but that was the tradition. When I was a kid, we used to have this rhyme, which we were told was wisdom, and referring to the red wine or the white wine served at a dinner. The first rhyme is that red after white, everything right. Red before white, everyone tight, meaning inebriated. Now we know that that is total nonsense today. We're much better informed. We know that alcohol is alcohol is alcohol. And there is no difference between the alcohol in a $200 bottle of wine versus a $5 India Pale Ale beer can. So mark that appropriately on all bottles, cans, etc. You will be able to note the alcoholic content, and that will explain the strength of the liquor in between. If we're going to discuss wines, we really have to start with France. It's the repository of all the great wines of the world. You'll be familiar with some of them. The most commonly known is Champagne, which comes from the north of France. The northeast is Burgundy and the Rhone Valley. And the third one is in the southwest. It's the Bordeaux region. These are great and ancient wineries, but sadly their prices frequently reflect that. The reason for that is they have wines that are very popular. Also, you have to store it for a long time because, generally speaking, wine improves with age. This is obviously, France is not the only place by far that wine is grown. Virtually anywhere that has plenty of sun and has a dry climate will work. And the most important one for us is California, which most famous is the Napa Valley and the Sonoma Valley, but also up into Washington State and Oregon, they have some good wines. Moving back to Europe, we've also got to look at Italian, Austrian, and Spanish wines, but they're honestly not of the quality of France, but the prices reflect that, so you'll get better value. In Germany and Switzerland, they're a little bit too far north for red wine, but they have plenty of white wines, and some of them are great ones. There are plenty of other places in Europe, and I don't want to offend anybody, but those are the great wine-producing ones that later on you'll be seeing and become increasingly familiar with. when you move out of Europe and move out of North America, you head to the Southern Hemisphere, and there are a lot of great wines there. Chile, on the west coast of Latin America, Argentina, South Africa, Australia and New Zealand. And I've been privileged to try all of these, and it's wonderful that we have this fabulous choice. I mentioned that most wines need a few years to mature. There is, however, a limit, and they have a life, they have a shelf life after which the greatness is gone. And I had a personal example of that myself. When I was most recently married, I bought a bottle of one of the great wines of France, Saint-Julien Talbot of Bordeaux, in the same vintage as my wife. And I will not disclose what that numeral was, but more importantly, I kept it very carefully for 25 years, and we opened it on our 25th wedding anniversary. It was vinegar. It was bad, even though I'd stored it properly on its side, but it may at some point have been stored vertical, and the cork might have dried out. We just don't know. So if maybe on a wine list, you'll see that wine with an old age, long distant vintage is very reasonable. Then be tempted to think that maybe it's past its sell-by date. If you want a cheap and nasty piece of advice on entertaining later when you're older, never order the cheapest wine on the wine list. Order the second cheapest, and you'll be fine. And don't order a really expensive bottle of wine. The markup in most restaurants is at least 100%. You can add your own collection and get twice as many bottles to drink at home. So that's my talk for today about wines. Again, the caveat, I'm not recommending that you drink below age, but when you do, it's a great adventure to start. Meanwhile, for you who are certainly well underage, my suggestion is keep watching those James Bond movies. There's somebody who always ends up with the right woman and possibly more important, the right wine. And until that time, just keep reading. Wine is a wonderful subject, and I hope that you'll go on that journey when you reach that age. Till next time.